welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys, and this is presented by the Cover One Sports Network. And T-Rent says it best. Welcome to the therapy session. At least we have each other. And Jason M coming in clutch says, can we change name of this show to the Let's Hold Each Other Hour? It is time, ladies and gentlemen, to just let it out. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to get through it. And then it's on to the draft. It's on to free agency, and it's on to 2022. But I'll tell you what, a couple of people were telling me this, a couple of older Bills fans that I know. I know my father's in town and stuff. And it's just like talking about the magnitude of the heartbreak. And a lot of people telling me like, well, now see me, my first memory really of the Bills is the drought era. I have a vague remembrance of the Music City Miracle. I really wasn't a big enough of a Bills fan at the time or old enough at the time to appreciate the heartbreak that was the Music City Miracle. But I'll tell you what, people are telling me like, this is the magnitude of heartbreak. You got Wide Right, you got Music City Miracle, and now we got 13 seconds. What are your thoughts on the magnitude of this heartbreak last night?
Yeah, the Music City Miracle really for me is one of those that I remember where I was when it happened, but I also remember sort of the swirling storylines that were going into that game as far as Rob Johnson starting over Doug Flutie. The Bills had really been a perennial playoff team for most of the 90s, and there wasn't really this thought of this is going to be the end of their run at that time, right? They were still a very good team, and turns out it was the end of their run for 17 years. And so fast forward now, you can kind of look back at the Music City Miracle and say like, well, in a way that one stings, but it was the Tennessee Titans. It wasn't like the Bills really necessarily had like huge Super Bowl aspirations that year, I would say, given the quarterback controversy that surrounded sort of that team, especially going into the playoffs. But this, to me, with as much time as we all invest in this team, doing research, doing shows, spending time on social media, interacting with the viewers, like all this stuff and time and energy and heart that we pour out into supporting the team, it's just naturally going to feel more heartbreaking at this age where we are now than when we were in like our teens or even younger during the Music City Miracle. So, I mean, Wide Right is like a flicker of a memory for me. Like I was like 4 years old. So, obviously I can appreciate the historic magnitude of losing those four, obviously in a row, and you get to watch all the documentaries and so forth. But this being in the moment, being the age I am now, this team being absolutely elite at the quarterback position in a way we have never seen before with this franchise, with everything right in front of them, knowing that the hosting the AFC Championship game was happening 13 seconds from there. That magnitude to me, it is easily the biggest. And you think how bad you felt after that Texans playoff loss? Oh my God. Like that's nothing now compared to this one. And obviously nothing compared to the AFC Championship game this last year. Last year's AFC Championship game, I don't even feel as bad as I did then as I do now. So, and this wasn't even the AFC Championship game. So, that's kind of where I am, man. I'm trying to process through it, but it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, by chance comes in and says he's not even sad. He's just flat out pissed, and that's an emotion. Let it out today if you're feeling pissed, and we'll talk about probably some of the reasons why we as Bills fans have to be pissed off. He says simply unacceptable from the defense, from Leslie Frazier, from Sean McDermott, and even Brandon Beane. And we got Chris S coming in and saying the Bills are tragic heroes. The only issue I have with that, Chris, is in order to be a hero, you have to at least at some point accomplish something. And the whole issue here is we aren't tragic heroes. I think Clay Troya said it best last night on Twitter, our old buddy over at the Buffalo Fanatics. He said, hey, these instant classics are great. I wonder, I would love for it to, be on the winning end of it at some point.
Exactly.
So that stings as well. And then we obviously have Brooke coming in with a super chat. Thank you, Brooke. We appreciate it. She says the sports gods just hate us. I mean, what did Buffalo do The Bills lose. The Stabers stink. Jack Quinn, first game looks good. He's out 4 to 6 weeks. What the hell is going on? What did we do? I have no idea. If you ask my father, I was born. That would be the issue, because the Bills Super Bowl streak started the year I was born. Their losing streak, and the year I moved out here to Arizona, they started making the playoffs again, but haven't had too much success in the postseason as well since I moved out here to the desert, I will say. Chevy YT says, can't wait for the offseason with you boys. If we draft JOK instead of Basham, we're in the Super Bowl. I'm done with Edmonds too. Yeah, we're going to get into linebackers tonight. And yeah, Jeremiah Wosu-Cormo, I wasn't sure if he was on. I'll have to go back and double check to see if he was still on the board when the Buffalo Bills selected Boogie Basham. I don't think he was, but obviously the Buffalo Bills could have quite possibly traded back up for him. And linebacker is going to be a talking point at some point in the evening when we get to starting to digest where we go from here after this this loss that we suffered. But I'll tell you what, why it stings. You mentioned the AFC Championship game last year. It pales in comparison because I mentioned this on the pregame show. This is a better football team than the AFC Championship. Last year, I was just enjoying the ride. It was kind of fun. Josh Allen was having a breakout year. I didn't have any expectations for the Buffalo Bills last year. I kind of assumed that team was a little bit not ready for the big stage. So when they got crushed by the Kansas City Chiefs, I was obviously crushed, but it didn't stick with me. It didn't stick in my gut because I kind of knew that was coming. I talked about in the pregame show, like, I'm ready to get hurt. I think this team is built different. And, speaking of the Music City Miracle too, I know Joe Marino over at Locked On Bills, one of his hottest takes is he thinks the Buffalo Bills would have won the Super Bowl if they would have beat the Tennessee Titans in the Music City Miracle. That is the year the Tennessee Titans were 1 yard short against Kurt Warner. He says that the Buffalo Bills had a rocking defense that year. If they would have started Flutie, he thinks that they could have won the Super Bowl that year. But that's a hot take, right? This is a legitimate football team where the winner of this football team, no doubt in my mind, is going to win the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs are probably going to go on to win the Super Bowl now, and that could have been the Buffalo Bills. You're looking for a team that's going to go into a mini reset here soon. You're looking at a quarterback who, through the 2 games that Josh Allen had were absolutely incredible. And like I said, I thought that this team had been through the adversity and were just built different. There is nothing in my mind that will change the fact that I think this team would have won the Super Bowl if they had just held on for 13 more seconds. And that's why it's going to sting so badly.
That's exactly why it's going to sting, because although we were in the AFC Championship game last year, I do believe, at least that most people were thinking that as good as the Bills were playing in that run, they hadn't proven yet that they could beat the Chiefs at that point, right? They lost in the regular season. And the Chiefs, I think last year, they were still a notch above the Bills at that time. And this year, that clearly wasn't the case, right? The Bills beat them in week 5, albeit some different players on the field. But you cannot tell me, and you will not convince me otherwise, regardless of the outcome of the game, that Josh Allen was not the best player on the field last night. Patrick Mahomes was incredible, absolutely incredible. But Josh Allen just was that much a little bit better. And that's the thing that sucks, right? Because like Josh deserves better. I think the fans deserve better than that outcome. I think the Bills having a chance to host the AFC Championship game, and we talked about, hey, the Browns winning that game late in the season in Week 18 against the Bengals got the Bills the 3 seed. This could get us that extra home game in the playoffs, and sure enough, it would have in the AFC title game. And they just could not find a way to whisk away those final 13 seconds in it, and it will sting for some time. Like, this one will stick with us for a while.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. We got a comment here from Matt Asiner. It says, we beat them. Josh Allen walked off the football field with 13 seconds left in the game, having given the Buffalo Bills a lead for the second time in about a minute and a half. The coaches gave it to them. So let's take a minute or two here and let's digest that last 13 seconds. The decision to kick the ball out of the back of the end zone, which may not have been a decision to kick the ball out of the back of the end zone. And we'll talk about that in a second. the decision to sort of play back. I mean, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde looked like they were trying to stop a Hail Mary. You had the linebackers back at like the 10, 15 yards deep, and they were rushing 4 guys. Give me your interpretation of that last 13 seconds there. Who's at fault? Was it execution? Was it a coaching decision? What went into that absolute embarrassment that was the last 13 seconds of this football game?
So I can understand both trains of thought as far as the kickoff, right? Kick it through the end zone. Don't give them a chance to make a big return. On the chance that they do make a big return and you stop them, a lot of time's going to come off the clock, right? Like someone just posted on Twitter, like probably 20 minutes ago, the opening kickoff of the game got out to the 26-yard line, took 7 seconds. I don't understand the people who said you should have squibbed it. That to me is a mistake.
That would be dangerous.
You can fall on the ball. No time's going to come off the clock, and you're likely going to be past the 25-yard line if you're the Chiefs. So I'm against the squib. I would have been fine with a high, shorter kick that we've seen from time to time across the NFL, where it's almost like a coffin corner kickoff.
We've done it to perfection all year,
and we kick it off maybe to the 10-yard line, even anywhere in 10 or inside, and just make them either conserve the time by calling a fair catch on a kickoff, which is super rare, and conserve their time, or force them to return the ball and waste a couple seconds, 3, 4, 5 seconds. Your coverage team had been playing fine all game. You hadn't really given up anything past the 25, 30-yard line on kick coverage. So that's the thing. I mean, and like Jason says, if we squib and takes 5 seconds to run the ball,
we're not sitting here. We're not sitting here advocating the squib in any way, shape, or form.
No squib. And so the kickoff is one thing, right? Kick it out of the end zone, fine. You just take the variable of a return touchdown or a big return into field goal range off the table. I get it.
But what you mentioned, they had coffin cornered it all year to perfection and gotten tackles before the 25-yard line and taken a bunch of time off the clock. They had done it all year long. And then at the end of the day too, watching Sean McDermott's press conference, I feel like he asked them to coffin corner it. I feel like he did. And I feel like there was some sort of miscommunication between Sean McDermott and Heath Farwell, or between Heath Farwell and Tyler Bass. I don't think what happened is what Sean McDermott wanted to happen. He said one thing in his press conference that we considered a bunch of things. It ended up being an execution problem. That's on me. He took the blame for it. I don't think that is what Sean McDermott intended to happen. I think he wanted that coffin corner, which had been uber successful for the entirety of the season here.
And I just want to address this comment really quick. From Dilly says you're wrong. They don't play you can take a knee at any point when you field the ball to give yourself up. You don't have to make a football move or do anything. Like, you can literally field the ball and take a knee and the play's over. So I'm not sure about about making a football move. I don't think that's a thing. Now, someone can correct me on that, but I don't think that's a thing. Explain to me why you don't coach to hold Tyreek Hill and Kelsey. You get the 5-yard penalty, but you drain the clock. And actually, that's an interesting point, because that happened on the prior drive, if you remember. The Bills did get a defensive holding call that took some time off the clock.
Yeah.
And it was only 5 yards. No big deal. The issue was not so much the kickoff, right? We can debate all day whether to coffin corner that kickoff or whether to kick it out of the end zone. The fact of the matter is, you had 13 seconds left in the game, and the sequence of events that happened after the kickoff is really what determined the game. And that was the coaches, as the previous comment said, putting the defense in a bad position there, right? Playing against a Hail Mary, playing against guarding against a touchdown when you know you're only up by 3 points. I have a kind of a hot take, right? I almost, in hindsight, would say we would have been better off not getting the 2-point conversion, because we would have been forced to play real defense in that situation with 13 seconds left, only up by 1 point. Now, I'm not saying that it was bad to get the 2-point conversion, but I'm just saying at least forces you to play real defense. And you should have been playing real defense anyway, but man.
And Louis Riddick absolutely ripped into Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott for their decisions. He goes, it wasn't a broken play. It wasn't a tired defense. If you go back and look at it, it was just fucking idiocy and it was cowardice. Like they literally had their linebackers at 10, 12 yards deep. They rushed 4 guys. They had their safeties back. Like they were so shook from that Tyreek Hill touchdown. And it was almost like they were playing for overtime. It was absolute cowardice. And to give to the point here of Walter, to give Tyreek Hill and to give Travis Kelce free release off the line of scrimmage in those situations is absolute. I'm not saying you even had to hold them. I'm just saying giving them free release off the line of scrimmage. There was not a single guy within 10 yards of Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce when the ball was snapped. There was no one there to jam them at the line. There was no one there to make them think. They just ran their route, and it wasn't until after they caught the football that there was anyone within 5 yards of them. Absolutely inexcusable. And we're going to get to this point. We're going to get to this point later. I believe that the decisions in the last 13 seconds of this football game shows exactly who Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator of this football team, is. I think he is the definition of vanilla. And whether he gets a head coaching job or not, I want no part of Leslie Frazier as the Buffalo Bills defensive coordinator in 2020 or in 2020, 2022. Excuse me. I want no part of him. It's time for Sean McDermott to go out and find a defensive coordinator who thinks a little differently than him and challenges him a little bit, because there is an edge missing to this defense. When the Buffalo Bills came out and played the defense they did in the last 13 seconds, I was not surprised in the least bit. Nothing the Buffalo Bills did in the last 13 seconds of that football game surprised me, because that's who Sean McDermott and that's who Leslie Frazier are. They are play for the tie. They are conservative. They are, we don't want to give up a touchdown and lose in an embarrassing fashion. Well, guess what? You lost in overtime because you're fucking cowards. Sean McDermott has spent an entire season trying to break this trend, and he has put in so much effort to become this guy, this aggressive guy offensively. But we still haven't talked about how they are absolutely cowards on defense when it comes to being aggressive. They aren't. When did we see aggression from this defense this year? The Miami game? Like, when have we seen exotic blitz packages from the football team? The Miami game? Like, it just absolutely ridiculous. That last 13 seconds was just embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing.
Do you like, and we'll get to by chance's super chat here. Being Rob Buffalo of his first Super Bowl, he brought back the exact same roster who lost last year to the Chiefs and expected a different result. Also, countless misses early in the draft. And I know by chance and I were talking about this on Twitter a little bit about the fact that, you know, Bean went out and drafted Rousseau and Basham and that type of player to try to make a difference in this type of game. And they really didn't, right? So there's a whole debate that we're going to have this offseason around the draft and sort of roster construction. That's kind of what we do a lot of in the offseason. But there is, I mean, this is not an unwarranted comment, right? This is not a comment that should just be passed over, right? I mean, those guys didn't make an impact in the game, right? Like, okay, maybe Rousseau got a couple pressures, but like there were no sacks by either player. You know, we talked about how pressures are great, but like you have to create negative plays against an offense like the Chiefs, right? You have to set them behind in the down and distance. Like a 2nd and 10 where you get pressure and you make Mahomes throw a little bit earlier and they pick up 5 yards and it's 3rd and 5, they're going to pick that up, right? Versus a 2nd and 10 where you actually sack them and then all of a sudden it's 3rd and 17. Okay, you take your chances. And as the graphic shows here, the Chiefs were 9 for 13 combined on 3rd and 4th downs, and that's against the number 1 3rd down defense in the NFL and the Buffalo Bills, as you just mentioned. I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the 13 seconds and how Frazier's conservative and all that. How much are you going to put on that 13 seconds versus sort of the body of work for the season where they were the number 1 defense in the NFL?
They were the number 1 defense. When we played Tennessee, who kept us in that football game against Tennessee? The offense. Josh Allen. When we played Tampa Bay, who had to bring us back in that football game? Josh
Yeah.
Allen. When we played the Kansas City Chiefs when it mattered. Indianapolis Colts. What happened to the Indianapolis Colts when we had to face Jonathan Taylor? Like when we play an offense with a pulse, they don't show up.
Hmm.
They were. I think Merck on Twitter said it best. I'm done looking at the statistics of the Buffalo Bills defense against any offense that's not in the top 15 in the league. I only want to see what the Buffalo Bills off or defense does against top 15 offenses, and that's how I'm going to judge. And that's going to be the barometer of my defense from here on out, because it looked like they were a house of cards on Sunday. And Efrain Barraza comes in and says, "Come on, guys, you're running this team down when they played a great game." The defense didn't play a great game. Not a single snap did that defense deserve play a good game. Like maybe a snap here or a snap there. You said on Twitter, there is no justifying that defensive performance
Yeah.
from the first quarter to the fourth quarter. Nothing the defense did on Sunday worked for a second.
A few
Josh
good
Allen,
plays here and there don't make it a good effort.
Josh,
That's
Josh Allen was superhuman, and he walked off that football field with 13 seconds left and a lead, and he lost. That is inexcusable. And I will tear down my football team because that's inexcusable from a defensive personnel standpoint and from a coaching standpoint. That's inexcusable. I don't care how good the Kansas City Chiefs are. The Buffalo Bills are just as good. And that goes back to By Chance's point from earlier when he says holding Brandon Beane accountable. I respectfully disagree with you, By Chance. I think for the most part, the Buffalo Bills were just as good of a football team as the Kansas City Chiefs. Like I said, Josh Allen walked off the field with 13 seconds left and a lead. Can you make the argument that there are things that Brandon Beane could have done that would have made the Buffalo Bills superior to the Kansas City Chiefs? And that would have made Josh Allen not have to have a superhuman effort in order to win the football game? I can buy that argument. But the Buffalo Bills were just as good as the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're going to get into the defensive performance. But for that defensive line, a hell of a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas, where Patrick Mahomes got away from some guys where he shouldn't have. And they had some scoring drives that they shouldn't have. So it's hard to put into words right now because you don't want to sound too negative, right? Like you want to have some positives. It was a good season. The Buffalo Bills are still going to be a force to be reckoned with next year, and you don't want to be that guy who's just like, this is fucking terrible, fire everybody, like all this stuff. You don't want to be that guy, but there is just this inner rage inside of you, and that's why we need this therapy session here tonight.
And I think
let it all out.
And the inner rage, I think, comes from the fact that 18-week season, a playoff win, winning the AFC East again, came down to a maddeningly frustrating 13 seconds of football, right? And I think that's where most people are upset, right? Like I think most people do a good job at realizing the Bills were really good this year. They battled through some ups and downs during the regular season. They got hot at the right time at the end of the season. Josh Allen's playing out of his mind in these playoffs, and there are plenty of positives in that regard, and we're going to get to that. But I think where people will get the most frustrated is they see this team do what it does. They see Josh Allen carry this team on his back, convert multiple fourth downs, whatever, will this team back. And then 13 seconds defines your season, right? Like that I think is the hardest thing for people to swallow, especially when, like it could have been, I'm not saying that by the Bills playing, quote, normal defense, that Kansas City might not have gotten to field goal range anyway. But don't give them a free 40 yards just to get into field goal range. Like, make them earn it. Just make them earn it.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking of, once those 13 seconds were over, get to overtime. Here's another thing that, too, is just menacing. Like, I sent this to you as a joke. Like, look at this hard-hitting journalism. Jason Wolf of the Buffalo News did a little puff piece before the game about how Josh Allen hadn't lost a coin toss all year. And then sure enough, Josh Allen loses both fucking coin tosses in this football game. So perfect on the season in coin tosses with Josh Allen until yesterday, when he lost at the beginning of the game and then he lost again in overtime. Josh Reed of Channel 4 made this note. He's like, oh, the defense looked gassed, right? Why didn't the Buffalo Bills use their timeouts? Do you think there's anything to be said about the Buffalo Bills' lack of their use of timeouts in overtime and sort of just letting the Kansas City Chiefs walk down the field the way that they did?
Would it have mattered?
I don't think
Honestly,
so.
the way the defense
I
was
don't think
playing.
so.
I mean, sure, like use the timeout. Like you're not going to go home with them, but
Mhm.
like if you think that calling a timeout would have made the difference in that overtime, I think you're kind of lying to yourself. I think we all knew when the Bills lost that coin toss that it was a high likelihood that they were going to lose the game,
Mhm.
right? I mean, they gave up 552 yards of offense. They let the Chiefs convert almost 80% of third down. I mean, you were going to need to
Mhm.
get a play from your defense that you hadn't gotten all game, and it was very unlikely.
Mhm.
So I don't think a timeout really. I honestly
Yeah.
don't think a timeout would have made a difference.
By chance, as the defense was gassed, they are just far less athletic. If you're comparing the Bills defense to the Chiefs defense, I would disagree. Josh Allen was carving up the Chiefs defense the same way
Mhm.
that Patrick Mahomes was carving up the Bills offense. And the Bills would have won the coin toss, they probably would have marched down the field and scored.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's an athleticism. I will agree that Kansas City Chiefs, I think, have had more grit and had more just of an edge and a dog mentality with their edge rushers. Melvin Ingram and Frank Clark stood out that game. Chris Jones stood out that game. Their linebacker, Nick Bolton, stood out that game. They had some dogs up front that really stood out in that football game, and I will give them the edge defensively because obviously they scored more points than we did. But I disagree that they're more athletic. I just think they have a different mindset, and I think Steve Spagnuolo instills a different mindset than Leslie Frazier instills. Walter Scales comes in, and I apologize, Walter, that we had missed this earlier. He says, "I'm sick of moral victories. We went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost. We did moral victories at the highest level." And me and my father was having this conversation last night. He made the joke, like, who's going to the airport? like who's going to the airport? And sure enough, people show up. And I'm not sitting here making fun of people who went to the airport. Everyone has a different way of processing losses. Everyone has a different way and a different mindset in the way in which they approach life. And some people find joy in things that other people find hard to find joy in. So I'm not going to sit here and ridicule those people or say it's tired or say it's embarrassing or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I will say this defense that I am over moral victories, and I think this team is over moral victories. I believe Harrison Phillips' response at the this morning during his press conference was like, it fucking sucks. Like, this is fucking terrible. Like, it was, and it's just, I'm still in shock that this team, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, I thought it was different. Like I had mentioned in the pregame show that this team was not overlooked. This team was not overrated. This team was not overhyped, I'm sorry, underhyped, overrated, etc. But this team had found a way to make it seem like everyone was against them, and they were utilizing that to fuel them. Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde felt disrespected. The defense felt disrespected. They felt like they were overlooked, even though they weren't. They had somehow convinced themselves they were. And to that paper tiger performance was just absolutely gutting. An absolutely gutting paper tiger performance. There's no other way to describe, and I'm not going to sit here and say they're overrated because they had a great season, but that was an absolute paper tiger performance from that Buffalo defense. They were outclassed by the Kansas City Chiefs. There's no excuse for the performance that they had.
Bills playoff game history, most yards allowed in a Bills playoff game was that game. Now, it's not totally surprising given the era we're in, but out of all the Bills playoff games in their history, especially through those 90s years, most yards allowed in any single playoff game for the Bills was yesterday. Steven Printup says we took both Super Bowl teams into overtime. Here's the thing about moral victories that I'll say. I think you can take moral victories when the team exceeds expectations and falls a little short, right? You can maybe take a moral victory out of the 2019 season, right? The Bills had the Texans on the
You
ropes with Deshaun Watson.
you you could call this a moral victory if Patrick Mahomes was 38 years old. But he's not.
Yeah.
He's 26.
And so you had a opportunity to, I mean, it's just another lost opportunity is what it comes down to in the Josh Allen era, right? Like we talked about this. You had the Bengals at home. If you win this game, you are either going to play the Rams or the 49ers. Tom Brady's out. He's out. 3 of the 4, like the two most elite quarterbacks in the NFC were out. Aaron Rodgers out. Tom Brady out. Right? No one in the NFC was standing in the Bills' way if they get to the Super Bowl.
And we had
you had Joe Burrow standing in your way at home. Okay.
Zach Taylor standing in your way at home.
I mean, look, anything could happen in that game. I'm not going to say it couldn't, but this was a path for the Bills to win a Super Bowl this year. So we don't know what next year holds. We don't know what any future years hold, right? We don't want to turn into Dan Marino. We don't want to turn into Peyton Manning until he kind of found that one lucky year where he ended up playing the Bears in the Super Bowl, right? Like, and got that one ring before he went to Denver. But man, like, there isn't always next year. Now you have Josh Allen, so you expect to be in the playoffs every year, but the path that you had this year may have been the path of least resistance that you could have ever seen. Not saying that the Chiefs were easy opponent, but you had them, right? Like, you had them and you let it go. You let it slip away. So
Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, AFC's loaded with quarterbacks. So I'm not, to your point, like, not saying Josh Allen's not better than any of these dudes, because it's him and Mahomes, and then everyone else is a tier below. But these are all guys who are good enough, if they have a better supporting cast, to beat Josh Allen, or an equal supporting cast to have a good day and beat Josh Allen. So it's going to be tough. It's not the NFC. Every quarterback isn't 38 years old. Your boy Lettuce comes in and says, free members of the mafia revolt against Judge and his non-Arazia beliefs. For those of you who have no idea what that means, Matt Arazia is a punter for the San Diego State Aztecs, known for the fact that he boots pretty much every single one of his punts like 95 yards. Dude's an absolute freak. He is draft eligible this year. He has declared for the draft. Your boy Lettuce wants to use the 25th overall pick in the draft on a punter, and I disagree with you, boy. So
wow,
that is what the dude's a fucking weapon. Dude's a fucking weapon. That's all I'm gonna say.
That'd be a great pick for like the Jets.
A third round. I'll use a third round pick on him. But I want to take some time, though, before we get too late into the show, to talk about Josh Allen and that performance. I mean, there's only one quarterback in NFL history to throw for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and rush for 60 yards in a playoff game. And that quarterback is Josh Allen, and he did it twice in 2 games consecutively. 2 of the better performances. He was 2 touchdowns away from setting the playoff record for most passing touchdowns, and it would have been his 3rd game, and he possibly would have had 2 after that, and his record would have been freaking untouchable if we had made it to the Super Bowl. That's the type of pace that Josh Allen was going. I was trying to process my emotions this morning and trying to figure out like why this loss was more gutting than usual. And I came to the realization about halfway through today when somebody reshared that video of Josh Allen just screaming on the sidelines, that video of him just going nuts, and then finally like embracing Ryan Bates towards the end. And I realized that the reason why this loss stings more than other losses, as weird as this sounds, I wasn't disappointed for me. I wasn't disappointed for my father, who's lived through like every loss imaginable in the history of the Buffalo Bills. I wasn't most disappointed for all the people that I know and love in the comment section and on Twitter. The person I was most disappointed for, of all the people on planet Earth, for losing this football game, was the starting quarterback of the football team. The guy been getting paid $258 million. That's the guy who I felt most sorry for. That's the guy who I felt most gutted for. And that just goes to show you, number one, what Josh Allen means to this team and this community, what Josh Allen has done over the course of this playoffs and over the course of the past 2 seasons. It's absolutely incredible. And that image of him on the sideline after he put the team up before the Tyreek Hill touchdown, this was before even the Tyreek Hill touchdown, is just going to be seared into my brain, and will be until the dude is hoisting a Lombardi trophy. He won the game twice. He won the football game twice. And he walked off the football field with 13 seconds left and a lead, and he is sitting at home right now. Inexcusable. Just inexcusable.
Multiple fourth downs. What was it? 4th and 17 or whatever it was, 4th and 15 that they converted there towards the end. When a professional athlete who's a starting quarterback of a football team, who's making $250+ million, and you feel like more sorry for him than you do anyone else, it really just, like you said, shows you exactly what Josh Allen's all about and what he means to all of us, right? And what he means to this team and what it means to us having the best chance we've maybe even ever had at winning a Super Bowl. And he deserved better than that at the end. He deserved better from Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier. That final 13 seconds, he brought them back twice, like you said, played absolutely impeccable 2 playoff games this year, carried the team on his back, selfless, did it all, ran, took countless shots, took countless beatings, gets hit all the time running the ball. And for us to feel that way about him and feel bad for him personally, even though we don't know him, just knowing what he represents, that says all you need to know about him, right? And I think that, we kind of tore down the defense earlier, but like this is the 180 right here with Josh Allen. Like you absolutely have. I mean, you even had people like Nick Wright coming out today saying like,
Oh, God,
okay,
that was so weird.
I'm done slandering. Like,
Yeah.
how could you not? How can you not look at Josh Allen now if you weren't already, didn't have your eyes open? Everyone in the country saw that game last night and saw what he did. He is a top elite quarterback in the NFL. There are 2 guys in the NFC and there are 2 guys in the AFC, and that's the short list right now. And guess what? Those 2 guys in the NFC aren't going to be around much longer. So that means he's going to be a top 2 quarterback in this league for the foreseeable future.
And at the end of the day, at the end of the day too, it's just you see relationships between quarterbacks and franchises sour when you can't reach the pinnacle, right? You see the relationship between Russell Wilson
and they won a Super Bowl.
And they won a Super Bowl.
2 Super Bowls. One. They should have won.
They should have won 2. But you see that relationship sour. Russell Wilson, the Seattle Seahawks, Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, to an extent, Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. Sean McDermott, that 13 seconds is on you. You lost this football game. Your franchise quarterback, who has set record after record after record, who laid his body on the line and literally did everything humanly possible to win that football game, is sitting at home today because of you. Because you made the wrong decision on a kickoff and because you played cowardice, prevent defense in the last 13 seconds of a football game. Because of that, our franchise quarterback is sitting at home today licking his wounds. While that might not affect the Buffalo Bills in the short term, if it happens again and again and again and again, it will become an issue and we will alienate the best thing that's ever happened to this fucking city. And it's not something that I want to say.
No. And I know Bruce Nolan, our friend at Buffalo Rumblings, has made plenty of comments today on Twitter about, look, we all have flaws. All coaches have flaws. All of our partners have flaws. And we accept the flaws for what they are, and we look at the good things about people. And we talked about this before, right, with the coaches across the NFL, and they all have their flaws. For Belichick even has some, right? He can't draft. Like every coach has flaws. Sean McDermott's flaws seem to be constantly in big moments in games, game management, right? Everything that happens between when the game ends on Sundays to when the game starts on Sunday, he's great. He's amazing. Preparation, practice, all that stuff. He's fine. He's great. And he's even great for the most part, by and large, during the games, outside of a few very, very bad decisions. And but those become a part of your persona, right? It's not it's a trend now, right? It's not And I'm not sitting here saying we should get rid of Sean McDermott. He's a top
No.
5 coach in the NFL. Like that. He has his flaws. We're not getting rid of him by any stretch of the imagination. He's still a great coach, but we almost have to like try to compartmentalize the flaws and like try to live with them and almost like win in spite of them sometimes. And this is one of those situations we couldn't really.
And the thing with Sean McDermott too is he learns from the mistake, he fixes it, but he doesn't learn from that mistake till after he makes it. So he'll go and he'll fix that mistake. But then after he fixes that mistake, another game will come along and another thing will happen that he hasn't seen and will have to lose in order for him to. And it's just a series of something different pops up. He makes a different mistake and he learns from that mistake. But just every time he does, another thing pops up that he's seemingly unprepared for in the moment. And that's what's uber frustrating here. Your boy Lettuce comes in and says, everyone saw up and down Allen be all the way up 2 straight playoff games. He destroyed that narrative that he can't string 2 good games together. And yeah, that was Nick Wright's point this morning. Like Nick Wright was all puffing his chest out and talking about how Josh Allen is a human roller coaster and he can't put together 2 good games in a row, et cetera, et cetera. And then, today he was just like, listen, I was scared shitless of Josh Allen that entire football game, and he strung 2 good football games together. He absolutely crushed that narrative. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the defense, because I think we do need to dig into the defense a little bit here. The Bills defense.
Let's take a quick shout out to Gabriel Davis on the stat line.
Yeah,
201 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns, playoff record. Dude was an absolute monster. I mean, Diggs and Knox combined for what, 15 yards, something like that. Let's see, 8, 9, and 16 yards combined for Diggs and Knox. Gabriel Davis 201 yards. Guy was a stud, and honestly deserves a huge shout out because he was clutch. He was the man.
The way he just fucking embarrassed Mike Hughes on that route. Dude looked like Mike fucking Evans on that route. Like, it was unbelievable. And we're going to get to this a little bit later on the show when we talk about sort of projecting into next year a little bit. I'm really excited for the Buffalo Bills to maybe realize that they don't need a 30-plus-year-old receiver to come in and, be Gabriel Davis's mentor. We don't need a John Brown. We don't need an Emmanuel
Sanders. Showed up in the biggest game in the biggest way.
Gabriel Davis is ready to be the number 2 receiver on this football team next year. And instead of being targeted 60 times, being targeted 100 times, right? Like, I really am looking forward to a season where Gabriel Davis is going to see his target numbers increase significantly. Like, that's something I'm really super excited for. But yeah, Bills defense, Chiefs offense. This is the number one thing I have to say about the defensive line, because it almost looked early on and it faded as the game progressed. It looked early on like the Buffalo Bills were somewhat prepared for Patrick Mahomes in terms of the rush was getting there.
Coverage was good.
The coverage was good, but Patrick Mahomes was just being Patrick Mahomes, and he was eluding all of that pressure. It was a lot of shoulda, woulda, coulda from the defensive line early, and it faded late. And really the only positive takeaway I have of that defensive line is Ed Oliver, I thought, played outstanding, despite the fact that the Chiefs had a game plan for him. They double covered him. They double teamed him the entire football game. What were your thoughts on just the defensive line?
I thought the interior played pretty well. I thought Harrison Phillips played pretty well too. He was getting held a ton. Ed Oliver was too. There were a number of plays, at least from the broadcast angle, that I could see where you could see the back of Phillips' jersey as he's chasing after Mahomes, and that someone's got a handful of his jersey and just nothing, right? So I thought the interior of the defensive line played well. I thought early on, the pressure was kind of there. Like, they were getting some pressure and coverage was holding up on the back end. But the problem was, like we talked about in the pregame, Mahomes with his legs, broken plays, like he can hurt you. And sure enough, he did on that answer drive for them on that first drive, and really pretty much all night. Look, the back end, like, didn't hear much from the safeties. I I thought Levi Wallace was put in some tough spots. I thought Tremaine Edmonds obviously didn't play a great game. I thought Dane Jackson was getting picked on early, but he did end up making that nice third down stop down near the goal line after those offsetting penalties forced Hawk to punt the ball again, and they got that big return. So for a young player like Dane Jackson, he took his lumps. I get it, but I also thought he weathered it. There were a couple things where the play to McKinnon, he waited for contact when I thought he should have attacked and made the play. But there's so many examples you can call out like that, right? So overall, look, the defense was not great. Ed Oliver got that one sack on Mahomes down near the red zone, and then was totally just wiped out by that defensive holding call on the next play. And so, look, there's not much you can say, man. 552 yards allowed. Really didn't get to Mahomes in any meaningful way as far as creating negative plays.
No answer for Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill. 246 receiving yards
between the two of them. Yeah.
The screen game. Can't tackle on screens.
Tackling. People are mentioning it. Tackling was pitiful.
Awful.
It was pitiful.
And listen, that's been an issue since 2017. I feel like that's been an issue since I've been a Bills fan, to be quite frank with you. But let's keep it to the Sean McDermott era. It's been an issue since 2017. Is it the players that Brandon Beane is bringing in? Is it the technique in which Sean McDermott is teaching? Or is it just the players themselves? What is going on here? Why can't this team tackle?
Well, I think it's weird because much like the run D and really kind of like the story of the defense, for the whole year, there were a lot of ups and downs. There are some games where wow, this team can really tackle. Jordan Poyer's not missing. Levi Wallace is coming up making tackles. Taron Johnson's coming up making some really solid tackles. Matt Milano. So there are games where you go, wow, this team is really tackling well, and then it disappears. So the inconsistency, I guess, it's hard to put your finger on it, right? Where does the blame lay or lie? Because they do go through really good stretches of tackling, and they do go through, really good stretches of run defense. But then it just kind of goes away. And I don't know what it is. It's inconsistency. Maybe it's just, look, that's the NFL. It's week to week. You're not going to be, superb every single week when it comes to tackling. But for a guy like McDermott who preaches process and preaches fundamentals, you'd think tackling be the top of the list, and that'd be one thing you could count on every week.
We got A. Brennan coming in, says, I love Sean McDermott, but the Pagulas should be on the phone with Sean Payton today. That would also be tampering. So that is an issue. This is what I'll say. Sean McDermott is 3 years from being on the hot seat. The only situation in which I can see the Buffalo Bills firing Sean McDermott anytime within the next decade, honestly, dude's gonna be Tomlin. Dude's gonna be Mike Zimmer. Dude's gonna be Marvin Lewis. Terry Pagula's gonna. We have a couple of 8 or 9 win seasons that the Pagulas will weather it because they love Sean McDermott that much. I understand that some people might not want to hear that, but Sean McDermott's gonna be here until he's old and wrinkly. Okay. The Pagulas are obsessed with the dude. The only situation I can see where what Brennick here is saying comes to fruition is if 3 or 4 years from now, what happened yesterday happens again. And I'm going to go back to that thing. You saw issues between Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. You saw issues between Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. There might be a situation, and this is absolute worst case scenario, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, when Josh Allen's contract is coming up again, where he says, listen, I'm frustrated with this franchise. We can't get over the top. Coaches keep making errors in crucial playoff games, and I can't get to the Super Bowl because of it. I want out. This is a complete hypothetical that could happen 5 years down the road, 4 or 5 years down the road. I could see a situation where the Pagulas say, how about we fire the coach and we keep you? I'm just projecting here. And I'm just trying to give some semblance of credence here. I understand what you're saying, A. Brunick, but we're 3 or 4 years away from that being a consideration.
They would have to have some epic kind of meltdown collapses, not make the playoffs for 3, 4 straight years. I mean, look, the AFC East does look like it's
And if
the
we don't make the
Bills
playoffs for
to
3-4 straight years, it's probably because the quarterback completely regressed and not Sean McDermott.
yeah, and look, the Packers did. I mean, how long was Mike McCarthy with the Packers? Or Aaron Rodgers got a Super Bowl with him, and
And
you
it's
know,
soured. And they've
and
had
it's
to fire him for
soured, even
LaFleur.
though the Packers were making the playoffs every single year, and it still didn't matter, right?
Mhm.
I mean, McCarthy was gone. Um, but you have to look at McDermott and say that he's going to be like a Tomlin or like a Sean Payton or someone like that who sticks around for several years. I mean, the Saints went through some rough stretches, even with Breeze,
Mhm.
right, under Sean Payton, where they didn't make the playoffs. That NFC South has been wacky for 15, 20 years. Tomlin hasn't made the playoffs, although he's never had a losing back-to-back losing seasons, I don't believe. Someone can fact
Mhm.
check me on that. Um, and and guys like John Harbaugh, right? Like the Ravens collapsed kind of this year and didn't make the playoffs, but the Ravens aren't sending John Harbaugh out of the building, right? Like it
Yeah.
happens. It happens, right?
Mhm.
But McDermott's now 4 out of the 5 years in the playoffs. Like this AFC East is there for the taking for the
Mhm.
foreseeable future. So it would take a really, really epic collapse for this to change.
Yeah, Walter comes into the super chat. I always appreciate it. Walter, he says Hawk had the best form tackle in the game. That is a problem. That 100% is a problem. And Andy Larson comes in and says, second year in a row, we've had no answers for Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Something needs to change if we have a chance to beat the Chiefs. And I mentioned this in the pregame. If we can't beat the Chiefs, something drastic might need to happen. And I alluded to this at the top of the show, or at least in the first 15 minutes of the show. I don't want Leslie Frazier back next year. This is my answer to Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. You need to let Leslie go. And I'm not even saying Leslie Frazier is a bad defensive coordinator. I just think that Sean McDermott needs somebody else in his ear. He needs another voice, someone who doesn't think like him, someone who thinks a little different than him, someone who will help him evolve and grow. Because right now, I believe Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott have plateaued because they're just too alike. I think Sean McDermott needs to realize that, and I think he needs to make the tough decision to let his friend go, whether he gets a head coaching job or not. And I think he needs to reach out to Vic Fangio or reach out to Wink Martindale or reach out to Jim Schwartz. And he needs to bring in a defensive coordinator here to collaborate with him, somebody who has proven in the National Football League that he can get the job done when it comes to getting to and pressuring the quarterback. Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, that was the issue, was that Patrick Mahomes had the time to get these two dudes to football. And that is how you beat Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying you blitz Patrick Mahomes, but you have to pressure Patrick Mahomes with 4 or 5 guys. And Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier have proven year after year they are incapable of doing that.
Yeah, and sometimes you need to get the right guy in the right situation. The Leslie Frazier for this situation was the right guy in the right situation at when we needed him. I don't know what the future's going to hold with him, whether he's going to get a head coaching job or what, but some of these guys that end up becoming like fits in situations you wouldn't think
Mhm.
were normal end up becoming fits. Like we know how good Steve Spagnuolo, for example, was with the Giants when they beat the Patriots he was the Giants defensive coordinator. He got that coaching job in the Rams he stunk and he kind of bounced around for several years after that between the Saints and the Ravens, went back to the Giants. And then he found his home with the Chiefs and it's worked out
Mhm.
for him, right? So like it's a weird journey sometimes, the way these coaches go in the NFL. So um, I'm not. I don't know what to make now of like Leslie Frazier because I thought for the season the Bills defense really did what they needed to do, but in that
Mhm.
13 seconds, it's hard to overlook it, right? It's really
Yeah.
hard to overlook. Like, is that kind of decision going to be made again in a big moment, or will they actually learn from it? You'd like
Mhm.
to think they learn from it, but I mean, thankfully, we don't have to make that decision. Maybe he gets a head coaching job
Mhm.
anyway, and it takes care of itself.
Outside of the defense, going back to the offense real quick. The one takeaway I had from the offense, outside of the fact that Josh Allen is just a fucking stud. Um, The only real issue I had with the offense was I feel like they wasted a ton of possessions, and maybe it didn't need to get it didn't need to get to the point where it was a shootout in the final 2 minutes. I'm not trying to obfuscate at all the responsibility of the defense or the coaching staff and what happened, because like I said, Josh Allen walked off that football field with 13 seconds left and the lead in the football game, and that's unacceptable to lose said football game in that situation. But we went down the field and we scored that touchdown, and then the second drive, and then the third drive, kind of stalled out before we scored again before the half. And then they came back after the half and they kind of stalled out a couple of times again before the touchdown bomb to Gabriel Davis. And sort of the offense lacked a sense of urgency in the middle of the game there. And it's almost seemed like they were trying to prove to the Kansas City Chiefs how tough they were. And it almost seemed like they wanted to prove how balanced they were. You saw a lot of 3rd and 1s go to Devin Singletary or Isaiah McKenzie. They took the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. Now, I talked to you in the pregame about how I wanted to see balance, and I wanted to see Devin Singletary carry the ball 7 times in the first half, at least 7 times in the second half. But it was clear pretty early on in that football game how fucking wrong I was to make that comment in the pregame, and that this needed to be a pass-heavy offensive game plan. And we probably could have used the pass to set up the run. Kansas City Chiefs did a really good job at that. The reason why Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon had the holes they did is because of the way the Kansas City Chiefs were passing the ball, not so much the way the Kansas City Chiefs were dominating the line of scrimmage or run blocking. It was the fact that we were sending everybody back to play the pass. So to me, that lack of urgency after the first drive, and then it took us all the way until half, and then it took us until the Chiefs got a 2-possession lead to find that urgency again, especially with Tyrann Mathieu out. It was just really frustrating. And that's my biggest gripe with the offensive game plan, was just that lack of urgency and spots in the middle of the football game.
Well, I mean, and you heard on the broadcast, right? I mean, Jim Nantz even mentioned to Tony Romo at one point, he's like, hey, do the Bills change their game plan at all now with Tyrann Mathieu out? And Romo was like,
Yep.
well, maybe not right away, but they will. And like, it took them a
did.
while
Yeah.
to do it. Devin Singletary had a couple of tough runs. I'm not going to lie, but like, he wasn't that effective this game. I mean, he's held under 30 yards on the ground, held under 3 yards a carry. And some of those plays, right, like you said, on the short yardage where he was trying to string it outside, I think he was trying too hard to look for a big play and then just taking kind of what was in front of him, which he had been so good at doing. And I'm not trying to blame Devin Singletary, by the way, because like it wasn't really his fault. There was some suspect run blocking as well too. It seemed like the Spencer Brown was struggling a bit in this game. Darrell Williams struggling a bit run blocking, but whatever. It needed to change. And like you're right. Like the Bills stalled on that first drive, came back with the 1-play drive, right? And then they stall kind of again on the next drive. And I think people saw the way the game was going, right? And were wondering why the Bills didn't go for it on that 4th and 1 at their own like 35, 40-yard line. That was another decision. I think that people were like, well, what happened there? And the Chiefs obviously come back and score, I think they made it a 9-point game at that point. And the Bills obviously came back, but yeah, this needed to be a Josh Allen game. You're right. Like I thought the balanced attack was going to be something that we'd see more of, but when it wasn't working early, you've got to pivot away from it, right? Like you've got to use Diggs on screens if you need to, use Knox on tight end screen. Like that was the other baffling thing to me. And I know their defensive scheme plays a part in that, but like you look at their 2 studs combining for 246 yards, and you look at Diggs and Knox combining for 16. Now I know Gabriel Davis did unworldly things, but man,
him and Beasley combined for more yards than Kelsey and Hill. Yeah.
So,
but Silas comes into the super chat here. He says, our lack of speed on defense was exposed. Levi's a nice guy off the bench, but we need speed on the edge and at linebacker and DBs to cover a Von Miller type and a Dante Jackson at CB2. Our defense is slow. I don't disagree with you, Silas. I will say this. Dante Jackson would be high on my list of free agents that I would absolutely love for the Buffalo Bills to pursue. But you also have to understand that we're paying our quarterback $258 million, and free agency is not exactly a pool that we're going to get to play in. So if you want these players, you're going to have to find them in the draft, and you're going to have to draft them early. With that being said, watching this football game and understanding who the Goliath is that we need to overcome if we want to reach our ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl, I can confidently say going into the offseason, and it has changed about 15 times over the course of the season, but I think it was pretty much nailed in what our two biggest needs are heading into the offseason, and they'll probably have to be addressed in the draft, is we need some kind of bendy edge rusher who doesn't need help to beat his guy off the edge and can naturally just get to the quarterback, and he can finish his sacks. No offense, Jerry Hughes, but a player who can finish his sacks, a TJ Watt type, a Von Miller in his prime type, a Max Crosby type, a Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati type, a Bosa type. Obvious, but they don't grow on trees. And we
I'll
need
say,
it. Mm-hmm.
go
Oh,
ahead.
you
Go
can
ahead.
go. I was
I
gonna
was
say
gonna say,
the other need was a physical, aggressive corner with speed, but those also don't grow on trees.
and people talk about pressures a lot. Pressures affect the quarterback. Pressures affect the quarterback. When you get into a game against Patrick Mahomes, kind of doesn't, right? Kind of doesn't. Like, he works his way around it. He has multiple arm angles. He can run. He can scramble. He can find guys that other quarterbacks just can't. So while pressures may matter against, 70, 80%, maybe even higher, the league, the team that you need to beat, it honestly, it doesn't matter that much. You need to get him down. You need to get him down. You need to create negative plays against a team like the Chiefs, whether that's creating a negative play with a turnover or whether it's creating a negative play with a sack and putting them really behind the chains is your best chance to get off the field. And the Chiefs just had short yardage after short yardage, third downs all game. And pressures matter, but sacks matter more, man, in games like this. They really do.
And this is a great point from Scopes Doped here. That's a great name, by the way, Scopes Doped. Sometimes pressuring isn't even what you want, because you pressure Patrick Mahomes and he gets out of the pocket, and all of a sudden coverage breaks down, right? And the next thing you know, someone's open, like a Jerick McKinnon and stuff, and they're making those plays down the field. So, and Allen does the same thing. Your boy, it's frustrating. But like I said, they don't grow on trees. I had a mock draft today. I took a defensive end in the first round. I took a cornerback in the second round, because I just don't see the Buffalo Bills being able to afford those type of players in free agency, nor, quite frankly, do I see those type of players in free agency, because those players don't make it to free agency. Rarely do they make it to free agency because they're that damn good, right? So the last mock draft I had the Buffalo Bills taking Cameron Thomas, the edge from San Diego State. In the first round, I had him taking Kyler Gordon from Washington, the corner, in the second round. I think you're only going to get him if you draft him. And that's why people make the arguments for retaining Levi Wallace or bringing Jerry Hughes back next year, because at least they don't they're not elite, but they don't embarrass themselves, and you can mask them, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, you can. And they're great guys to have until you can get those guys that don't just grow on trees. But it's rearing its ugly head against an offense that has Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce. It really is. Mm-hmm. Having the lack of, someone mentioned it earlier, we don't have a Josh Allen on our defense. Jordan Poyer is a first-team All-Pro. He's good. He's not the Josh Allen of our defense. Matt Milano is good. Had his worst game of his career probably against Kansas City Chiefs last week. He's not the Josh Allen. He's not a Josh Allen of our defense. You know what I mean? Like, there's no Aaron Donald. There's no TJ Watt walking through that door. It's not going to happen unless you draft someone and develop someone and find someone, in the first couple of rounds of the draft. It's the only way you're going to get it. It's the only way you're going to get it. And there's, I did a mock draft today. Defensive end, corner, first two picks. Well, where's the wide receiver? I want him more. What do you want? If you want TJ Watt, if you want JJ Watt, if you want Richard Sherman in his prime, Richard Sherman, like, you want that? If you want that, you got to draft it. You got to draft it high. Mm-hmm. There's no other way around it. Your boy Lettuce comes in and says, our biggest issue on defense is good tight ends. We have issues with guys like Jonnu Smith, let alone we didn't have problems with Jonnu Smith this year, except for what he had, like, the only catch in the wind game. Let alone the Kelce's and the Kittles of the world. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with you there. And we're going to get to talking about linebackers in a second. I think I just think mindset has something to do with it too. The way we utilize our linebackers. Who knows if we utilize Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano in different ways, they could be more versatile. Who knows? Stephen Printo comes in and says progress, not perfection. I agree with you to an extent, but like you're not progressing with Levi Wallace and Jerry Hughes. You're staying static. So take a swing. Let him go. See if you can upgrade. There's the fear that whoever you upgrade them with, it's going to be a massive downgrade and it's going to knock you down a couple of pegs because those are important positions. CB2, your number one edge rusher, etc. But you're plateaued. You're plateaued there right now. At edge rusher, at corner outside of Trey White, you're plateaued. So you got to be willing to take that swing. And let's see if the Buffalo Bills are willing to take that swing this offseason. All right. So that sort of brings me to, that sort of brings me to where do we go from here? And I just want to take a look at the Buffalo Bills coaching staff. I want to take a look at their roster, and I just sort of want to have a conversation about where we go from here. We're going to do a roster deconstruction episode. We got the Senior Bowl next week, and we're going to talk about our schedule coming up because there are some changes to the Air Raid Hour schedule. Still be here on Mondays, don't worry, but we're adding some shows. We got the Senior Bowl. Then we got our favorite guest every year, Dean Kindig, coming in to talk some draft. So we're going to step away from maybe the specificities of the Buffalo Bills for like a week or two. And then we're going to do our roster deconstruction show before free agency and before the combine. And that's when we'll really get into the nuts and bolts. And we'll start to hear some of the rumors and rumblings coming out of One Bills Drive and maybe even see a couple of transactions or two. But let's just have a baseline conversation here. Where do we go from here at offensive coordinator? Joe Shane is in New York. He has been hired as their general manager. Brian Daboll is having his second interview tomorrow. All signs are pointing to Brian Daboll becoming the head coach of the New York Giants. My guess is he probably takes assistant quarterback coach Shea Tierney along with him. Most of the other guys on this coaching staff are McDermott guys. Chad Hall, Ken Dorsey, Bobby Johnson. They're not so much Brian Daboll guys. So in looking at this, you had Josh Allen today saying he would like a say in who the offensive coordinator is. In a perfect world, he would like to think he's earned a say, and that his number one endorsement would go to a guy who's already in the building, in Ken Dorsey. Is that case closed? Is Ken Dorsey our next offensive coordinator?
Case closed. You're paying the guy $260 million. He just threw 9 touchdown passes in 2 playoff games, had an unbelievable stretch in these 2 games, and put up another MVP caliber season. I mean, he gets the LeBron treatment, right? He gets some say so, I think, at this point. And if he's going to give a ringing endorsement to Ken Dorsey, it's case closed in my mind. Like, it's Ken Dorsey. That's it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the only situation you see is like, and I don't see Josh Allen as this type of guy, but like maybe he says the nice things to the media because that's the guy in the room. But in reality, he wants something else. So he sort of is whispering that behind closed doors. But I doubt it because I don't think that's the kind of person that Josh is. So I do think it's pretty much case closed that Ken Dorsey is the next offensive coordinator of this football team. I can put my list away at least for another year. I have a list of players, people I would like to see get an opportunity as offensive coordinator. But I said my piece on Leslie Frazier, and I still think there's a chance that Leslie Frazier could get the Chicago gig. Oh gosh, God bless you people in Chicago. No offense if you get Leslie Frazier. I just don't think he's cut out for being a head coach again in the National Football League. But even if I've said my piece on Leslie Frazier. I've said my piece. What is your piece? Do you think Leslie Frazier chances are he will be back. I think we can all agree he will be back if he's not hired as a head coach. Do you believe, like me, that he shouldn't be?
Yeah, I mean, look, at this point, I would say the odds of him being back are higher than him not being back as far as like him. I would lean more towards he's not going to get a head coaching gig at this point. And with that said, I would definitely think he's back again as the Bills DC next year. Now, I maybe don't have so much of an issue with it as you might, just because, like, in my mind, the only way you really make a call maybe to kind of make that change is if you thought like a Vic Fangio or a Jim Schwartz was going to represent a significant upgrade, and McDermott felt like, hey, I'm going to try to get ahead of maybe some of the mistakes that we've seen and make a change ahead of it before it's too late, right? And that would be the only situation I would say where you would see like McDermott actually making a big change like that. I think the problem you might have with that is that it seems like the players in the locker room really love Leslie Frazier. Now, devil's advocate, are how many of those
Is that a
players
good
are going to
thing?
be back
Also, is
next
that a good
year?
thing? Is that a good thing? If the
I
players love him, is
mean,
that a good thing?
yes, and yeah,
There,
yes
there
and
could be
no,
some
but
negatives to that. There could be some negatives to that.
there could be, there could be. But I don't mind seeing him back next year. The only reason I would say it would kind of sting a little is because you have a pretty good crop of defensive coordinator types would appear to be available that are potentially
Mhm,
an upgrade and potentially give you a little bit different flavor than what Sean McDermott gives you, and that's Fangio and Schwartz. Those are the two guys I keep coming back to.
mhm,
So um, that's going to be the interesting sort of decision. Is Sean McDermott going to be willing to fire his friend Leslie Frazier and bring in a guy like Vic Fangio or Jim Schwartz, who's a consultant right now, to try to re-inject some aggression, I guess I would say, into this defense because it kind of goes against his, philosophy. And is he willing to
mhm,
do that? That's the biggest question. Is Sean McDermott willing to make a change in some of his philosophy as far as aggressiveness, schematics, things like that? If the answer is yes, then yeah, you'll see a change. If the answer is no, he's fine with having a number one defense in the NFL, as paper tiger as it may have been in the
mhm.
playoffs, you won't see a change.
And then last but not least, I never thought we would be having this conversation, but special teams coordinator Heath Farwell. It's only his second year in Buffalo. He was a few years as an assistant in Carolina. He wasn't too long ago just a player in the National Football League. Our punter has sucked at punting this year for the most part. We've had kick returner issues. Statistically, we've been hovering in the mid-teens in terms of DVOA special teams wise.
Mm-hmm.
You had the issue with the Tyreek Hill return. You had what could mean possibly be a miscommunication with Tyler Bass. Sean McDermott, the vibe I was getting from that dude was he did not want Tyler Bass to kick that football the way he kicked that football. Could we see a change at special teams coordinator? Could Heath Farwell quit, fall on the sword, maybe be the sort of the scapegoat for what happened? Could you see that a situation there, or could the Buffalo Bills make him a scapegoat, fire him? I would have said this was crazy 2 days ago, but I think there's enough science here to point that like if something happens in the next day or two and Heath Farwell is let go, it's not a surprise.
It's not, but it'll be a weird scapegoat in my mind,
Super
right?
weird.
You have to really separate the kickoff from what happened thereafter, right? And what happened thereafter was your defense. It wasn't special teams.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Ox struggles aside. Um, you lost Andre Roberts to free agency. You were trying to figure out what to do personnel wise with your kick and punt returns all year. Coverage units were pretty good. You have Tyler Bass. The holding situation's good. So I think it's more of a personnel question than a coaching
Mm-hmm.
question, to be perfectly frank, right? Like a new punter maybe, and really got to settle on who your kick and punt returner is going to be, because the coverage units and our core special teamers that we have playing coverage are fine, right? Your Matakeviches of the world, those types, right? Um, but in special teams, the personnel that gets magnified are your kicker, your punter, and your return men, right? And so to me, it's less of a coaching thing and more of a personnel thing on
Mm-hmm.
special teams. But if the Bills are trying to find someone to fall on the sword, I maybe, but it seems really odd to me. It would seem really odd to me.
Yeah, it would be super weird. Transitioning now from the coaching staff to the players on the football field. I'm looking at the skill position players. Running back, I think Devin Singletary and Zach Moss will both be on this football team next year, but I do think we add a third running back. Looking at the wide receiver room, I think the only real locks are Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. I think that Marcus Stevenson, Isaiah Hodgins are still projects. They're not locks to make this roster next year. Cole Beasley could easily be a cap casualty at his $6 million savings. McKenzie is a UFA. Emmanuel Sanders is likely gone. Looking at tight end, Tommy Sweeney, no lock to make this roster next year. The way he was inactive a ton. It's Knox, it's Gilliam, who has sort of caved out a role. So I'm looking at these skill position players. Singletary, Moss, Diggs, Davis, Knox, Gilliam. That's really it in terms of guys I feel comfortable prognosticating onto the roster into 2022. And what I'm wanting from this position group is a speed running back, sort of an upgrade over Matt Breida, a guy that would probably send Zach Moss to the inactive list, and more dynamic slots. I think Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs are fine on the boundary. I want some more dynamic slot options and a second viable tight end that we can utilize some 12 personnel without it being Tommy Doyle. What are your thoughts? And I know a lot of people are saying no Moss. He's going to be in training camp next year. Like they're not going to cut the dude. Like he's going to be here next year, probably as our inactive third running back. You're just going to bring somebody in to compete with him, and maybe possibly keep him on the off the field. What are your thoughts on the cornerstone players of this offense who's going to be back next year, and sort of what you're looking for in terms of what personnel needs to be added to these skill positions?
I mean, I would largely agree with you. Obviously, like we're talking about this on January 24th, right after the Bills lost, but like McKenzie's not under contract. Sanders is going to be gone. Like I would probably lean more towards Cole Beasley will be back than
I want
not.
a more dynamic slot. I'm sorry. I just want more dynamicism there.
I don't disagree, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that as it stands, you can't just let him go when you don't know what's going to happen when McKenzie and Sanders is going to be gone. So like as it stands today, I would prognosticate him to be back. And if McKenzie's back, maybe that changes your decision, right? But we're talking about like who's under contract right now, right? So Tommy Sweeney's been inactive, obviously late here in the season. The Bills really just rolling with one tight end and using Tommy Doyle as that sort of second, big tight end, like they use with Lee Smith. And Gilliam, like you said, it's carved out a role, so he'll be back. So otherwise, other than I would probably just prognosticate Beasley being back, then as far as guys that are under contract right now, right? So like if we're McKenzie, we'll see, right? Like, but he's a UFA, so we'll see what happens there. But I would say Beasley's back as of now.
A great question here from Dog26. He says, so what do you mean a more dynamic slot? Right now you have Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley's biggest asset to you is when the opposing teams run zone defense. He's no longer athletic enough to beat man-to-man coverage, at least do it consistently. He is very much a zone beater. You have Isaiah McKenzie, who's not quite the route runner to find the holes in zone defenses. He is used as a gadget player in those sort of jet sweep running plays, and he is used to help beat man-to-man defense. I would like a player who brings the speed of Isaiah McKenzie to the slot, who can beat man and can beat zone, can be used on those jet sweep trick plays, and can also be a reliable kick and punt returner, which Isaiah McKenzie has proved he cannot be. There are a number of players I've had my eye on for a while now, both in the draft and free agency. My number one free agent target for the Buffalo Bills this offseason is going to be Braxton Berrios of the New York Jets. I would release Isaiah McKenzie, or I would release Cole Beasley, take that $6 million and give that $6 million a year. I would give that to Braxton Berrios straight up. Braxton Berrios can be your starting slot receiver in the Cole Beasley role. He can do the Isaiah McKenzie jet sweep stuff, and he can be practically an all-pro kick and punt returner. So I would utilize that money elsewhere. Take that $6 million that you're investing in Cole Beasley, a one-trick pony at this point, and instead of it being 2 or 3 players that you need to fill all these different roles, you are finding one player who can do it. In the draft, you're talking about the Kelvin Austins of the world and the Jahan Dostins of the world, the Treylon Burkses of the world. So there are other guys available in the draft that can do that as well. I'm just looking for someone who can play more than one role and can do more than one thing. Wendell Robinson is another example of someone available in the draft. Just someone who you don't need a different guy for each and every specific little thing that you're doing. You can add a little bit more mystique to your offense if one guy can do all those things, because it keeps the defense guessing. When you see Isaiah McKenzie on the field in the Bills offense, you can expect one thing. When you see Cole Beasley, you can expect another, et cetera, et cetera. So Big Scooby, I'm not about to say that we're going to go out and find Welker or Edelman, but I would like the Bills to certainly try to find Josh Allen his safety net slot receiver for the next 5-10 years. Go out and get that guy. That's what I want. That's my personal opinion. There are other people that disagree wholeheartedly with that. They're fine with they feel Isaiah McKenzie can do all those things. He just hasn't been given the opportunity. They feel like we should restructure or extend Cole Beasley and bring Isaiah McKenzie back and just keep doing what we're doing. All of those things work. They're just not my personal preference for what I would like to see in the slot. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the fact that, Isaiah McKenzie checks this box, and this box, and Cole Beasley checks this box and this box, and no one quite checks this box, so we have to have Micah Hyde returning punts in the playoffs? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, ideally, you would find a guy who can play multiple roles, right? And with the exception of Andre Roberts, who was an all-pro punt and kick returner, you could get away with it if you had a guy like that. Now, we could get away with that with a guy like Andre Roberts because he did both, and he did both very well. Like, that was one of the issues we had going into this season, right? Like, we didn't even know if the same guy was going to do kick and punt returns, and how many roster spots are we going to use for each of these guys. What's Marquez Stevenson's outlook going to be from a return man standpoint next year? Is he going to be given a chance to kind of come back and compete again for that, for those duties? Does that maybe alter your plan as to what you do maybe with your receiving room? If you feel like, okay, well, maybe Stevenson isn't necessarily going to cover out a role on offense, but maybe he can really be that guy that can do kick and punt returns. So it's going to be interesting. And like McKenzie being a free agent, obviously will kind of probably provide a lot of clarity as to what the Bills are thinking if they make an effort to kind of bring him back. But I don't disagree with the premise of having a guy that can play multiple roles because you save roster spots that way. I just don't know right now who that guy would be based on like who we're going to bring back or like who we're going to restructure, right? Like, and Namdi here says, was Stevenson a waste of a pick? I think it's too early to tell.
I also think
right?
it was so late in the draft that like you drafted a guy with speed to kill. Like, why not take a chance on that guy late in the draft? I mean, he could end up being a waste of a pick, but he could also end up being the fifth receiver on this football team who you just put him on the football field and tell him to run really far down the field and stretch the defense for everyone else, right? So, he's still in the. Look how long it took Isaiah McKenzie to turn into Isaiah McKenzie. Isaiah McKenzie didn't turn into Isaiah McKenzie overnight. That dude has been here with the Buffalo Bills since Josh Allen's rookie year. Right. He is the longest tenured receiver in this receiver room. And he did not get to be the player that he is in one season or two seasons. It took him 3-4 seasons to get there. So Marquez Stevenson is a guy where I don't see other teams knocking on the door to steal this dude. Even if he doesn't make the roster next year, he could very well make the practice squad. And if he does make the practice squad, he can do that type of Isaiah McKenzie development. Someone in the comment section said they'd like to have a big slot too. There are some dudes in this draft that you could consider as big slots. You could draft another tight end and maybe Dawson Knox becomes your big slot because you have another tight end you can play off of. You draft a guy with inside outside flex and Gabriel Davis can move into the slot. So there are other ways to get that big body. I would like a more dynamic, speedy slot because I think it adds a different element to the offense. And I just think that there are easier ways to move guys into the slot role to make them a big slot. Isaiah Hodgins is another option on the roster as well. Michelle Holloman keeps talking about Jahad Dotson. Yes, Jahad Dotson is squarely on my board at the end of the first round for the Buffalo Bills. I think he is an absolutely dynamic slot option who could even be used on the outside as well. I mean, his speed in the slot would just be
This
an
year's
element.
KJ Hamler, perhaps?
I think he's more refined than KJ, and KJ's size is really taking a beating on him. Skye Moore
Yeah,
is another one
it
of my
has.
favorites. He could be this year's Deontay Johnson coming out of the MAC. My comp for Skye Moore is Deontay Johnson. Yeah, it's there are dudes. There are dudes. And this is the conversation that we're going to have. The reason why Braxton Berrios is my number one free agent with a bullet is because we had this conversation earlier. We've plateaued at CB2. We've plateaued at edge rusher. If we want to go out and get a dude to be a really good CB2 or go out and get a dude to be our number one edge rusher, he ain't getting that in free agency. Like, you ain't going to be able to afford that. You're going to have to get it in the draft. And that takes Jahad Dotson off your board. And you got to go find that wide receiver elsewhere. I think it's easier to find a receiver in the later rounds of the draft, in the middle rounds of the draft. I think it's easier to find a receiver in free agency than it is to go out and find those dudes who can be physical and fast on the boundary at corner, or to go out and find those bendy edge rushers who can get to the quarterback and finish sacks. That's who you use your first and your second round draft picks on, and you go and you try to find those receivers elsewhere. That's my internal struggle right now, because I do love me some Jahad Dotson, and I would love it if the Buffalo Bills took him with the 25th pick in the draft. So absolutely going to be a crazy offseason, and we will be here to break it all down, because we're going to 2 shows a week starting soon, and we're going to announce that at the end of the show here. But shifting over to the defense, looking at the defensive line, right? Rousseau, Epinesa, Basham, they're guarantees to come back. UFAs, Hughes, Addison, Obata. On the interior, Oliver and Starr are likely to come back, as much as people don't want Starr to come back. I think he's at least going to make his way to training camp. If we decide to cut the cord from there, we cut the cord from there. Harrison Phillips and Vernon Butler are UFAs. I'm feeling pretty confident Harrison Phillips comes back. But looking at this defensive line, I'm ready to walk away from Jerry Hughes, and Mario Addison is the number one thing that I want to say. I'm ready to walk away. I'm ready to cut the cord. I'm looking for a bendy edge who can finish early in the draft, and I'm looking for more power players on the interior defensive line, whether that's veterans in free agency on those sort of dust settler deals or middle round guys. But there are very, very few of them in the draft this year. What are your thoughts on who should be coming back on this defensive line and what the Buffalo Bills should be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to think almost that this will be the 3rd year in a row that we're potentially going through like a major sort of retooling on the defensive line. As much draft capital has been put into this line, first picks of the draft in the last 3 years between Oliver, Epinesa, and Rousseau, and really 4 of your first 4 picks in recent years, with Basham as well in the mix. So it's a little bit concerning that you are drafting heavy early on the defensive line, and you're not really reaping the rewards of it fully yet. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of Addison or Hughes is back. I'm with you though. I'm okay kind of moving on from both. I think Harrison Phillips should be back. That seems like a no-brainer to me. Vernon Butler's as good as gone, I would think. And F.A. Obata kind of is like the X factor. Are they going to be willing to bring him back? Kind of went through a mix of inactive games, active, had a few good moments, but also like didn't really make a huge impact this year in his playing time. So look, I mean, it's sad, really, honestly, with the defensive line, the fact that we're going to have this conversation for a 3rd year in a row.
And Thomas Burke, if I missed a super chat, I apologize. Throw it in as a regular chat. I'm not seeing it here in the comment section, so throw it in as a regular chat, and I will get to it. I'm super sorry. I'm usually pretty on top of those, so I do apologize if I missed that, Thomas. So just say like super chat and then leave your comment, and I'll make sure that we get to it. My apologies for that. We never want to miss a super chat, and anytime we do, it's completely accidental.
Found it. Got it.
Found it. There we go. All right. Our apologies, Thomas. He says their key player is both punters. Whoever punts 3 times loses. Bills punted 4 times. Chiefs punted 2 times. Yeah. I mean, we talked about that in the pregame show. These are 2 Goliaths, right? And whatever team Whatever team executed better in the football game was going to win the football game, as weird as that sounds. And the Kansas City Chiefs executed better. What's the proof that they executed better? They punted less. They scored on more drives than the Buffalo Bills scored. We mentioned that lack of urgency in the middle of the show. The second and the third drive, they stalled out because they were trying to prove they were these big, tough running team, and they were taking the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. It put a dent in the game. And then they sort of slowed down again after the half. And then the Chiefs finally got out to a 2-score lead. And they're like, okay, we're going to throw a bomb to Gabe Davis now. So it took the Buffalo Bills, they fell asleep a little bit in terms of the football game. So totally agree with you there. You had a comment here you wanted to get to?
Oh, yeah, I think I accidentally clicked that, but he's good. Go all in weapons in the draft and find a corner. We'll get to the draft talk eventually, obviously, but we've got a long off season ahead. Our schedule's changing, like you mentioned, so I don't know. Maybe now's a good time to let everyone know.
Yeah, so maybe we should end some of the roster construction talk and save that for another day. But starting next week, we are going back to Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So now that our Sunday pregame show is over, we will be doing a show every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we're getting into the off season, folks. This is Dave and I's favorite thing is very much roster construction, draft prospects, free agency prospects, training camp battle, like all of that difference, all those different things, those sort of nitty gritty, armchair GM type of things. We very much enjoy, that type of show. So we're going to be getting after it every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Starting next week, we're going to have coverage from Mobile. Russ Brown from Cover One of the Cover One Draft Prospect, Cover One Draft podcast is going to be in Mobile, and he will be live on our show, talking about the prospects to keep an eye out for at the Senior Bowl. We're going to have Dean Kindig in here, setting up all of the draft prospects that we should be keeping an eye on as the process goes along. We'll be deconstructing the roster. We'll be previewing free agency. We'll be hitting the combine. We'll be reacting to free agency. And then after that, it's draft. And I have been sliding into dozens of DMs on Twitter. Draft insiders galore are going to be making guest appearances on this show. We will have the return of Casey Reed, the return of Kendall Mursky. We'll be talking draft with us. So it is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, a legit off-season, fun conversations. You guys in the comment section are going to be an absolutely huge part of that. So we look forward to going back to that Monday, Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern time schedule, and we hope you guys will join us. And the full schedule, literally a show-by-show breakdown of everything we'll be doing, is available right at the top of our Twitter page. It is pinned at the top of @TheBillsGuys. A couple super chats came in while we were on a soapbox here. Rattle Me This says, as a Chiefs fan, even I'm upset that this kind of game came down to a coin toss. My heart goes out to y'all. I'll tell you what. Thank you. And I appreciate that as a Chiefs fan coming in here. We respect you guys. It's tough. If you guys win, I won't be upset next week, but no offense to you, because you've been so gracious to us in the super chat there. I find it very hard to root for a team supported by Brittany Matthews and Jackson Mahomes. It's going to be difficult, but I will say that if you guys win, I won't lose sleep over it next week. And I think Mina Kimes made the best point on ESPN today. She's like, it's not even about like the Bills got ripped off. The Bills didn't get ripped off. They lost this football game, 13 seconds. They should have stopped them. Kudos to you for winning that football game. Kudos to you for having an absolute rock star tight end, an absolute rock star quarterback, an absolute rock star wide receiver. Like, enjoy that, man. That's awesome for you. 10 out of the 11 teams, I think 10 out of the last 11 teams or something like that, who won the coin toss won in the playoffs. It's clearly a system rigged to the team that wins the coin toss, or a system that completely favors the team that wins the coin toss. And I just don't understand It's not hard. And people want to complain about the college rules because they think the college rules will take too long or it's too tough. Back them up to the 40-yard line. Give the Chiefs the ball at the 40-yard line, let them go down the field. Give the Bills the ball at the 40-yard line, let them go down the field. And if the Chiefs kick a field goal and the Bills score a touchdown, the Bills win. If the Chiefs kick a field goal and the Bills don't score, the Chiefs win. Whatever. If the Chiefs score a touchdown, the Bills don't, the Chiefs win. It shouldn't take that long, right? And even if it does take long, fuck, it's going to be awesome. Like, it's going to be super awesome. It's not difficult. I'm not saying put the ball at the 25-yard line like they do in college. You can back it up a little further to like the 40, but just something's got to change because it's just no fun. It's absolutely no fun for
I say
anyone
50.
involved.
I say 50-yard line.
Yeah.
Put it at the 50, then you actually really have to think about would you take a field goal or not, right? And then the other team gets possessed. So, yeah, something like that would be interesting. By Chance comes in with a super chat here, says, what's the deal with giving Elijah Griffin a 2-year deal and giving everyone else a 1-year deal? That is interesting.
So that was also on my list of things to talk about. We got a couple of great comments, and we really appreciate the numerous comments that we've gotten in the comment section too. Hey, you guys got me through off season last year. That's what we're here for, man. Like, we are here to get you guys through the off season, to have a conversation, to let everybody be heard, to share ideas back and forth, and to just make each other better fans. Like, that's the point. It's just to just be the Spills Mafia community, have the conversation, have the debates, get you guys involved in the comment section, and just all be better, as fans. But to By Chance's point, Elijah Griffin gets a 2-year futures deal from the Buffalo Bills. Super interesting, seeing as he wasn't even one of the call-ups. Nick McLeod was. The Buffalo Bills also signed Nick McLeod to a 1-year deal, Tim Harris to a 1-year deal, Josh Thomas to a 1-year deal, Joe Giles-Harris, Mike Love, Brandon Bryant, Isaiah Hodgins, Tanner Gentry, Quentin Morris, Jacob Kempra. All the 1-year futures deals. They're all going to be on the roster next year, heading into training camp for the most part. On top of that, Elijah Griffin's 2-year deal, no Davis Webb, no Antonio Williams. So some interesting things going on here with these futures deals. What are your thoughts on, let's start with Elijah Griffin's 2-year deal. What are your thoughts on that?
It seems weird, right? Because you don't really see 2-year future deals very often. Like, it's a rarity. I feel like it's always usually like 1 year. But I'm sure it's a similar situation where it's like, if they cut him, it's like, it's not going to be an issue, So maybe the Bills are saying like, look, we liked what we saw from this guy on the practice squad. We think we can develop him. We've said multiple times that we feel like the Bills, at least in this current coaching staff, feels like they can squeeze more out of the defensive backfield than they can maybe at any other positional unit they have. So perhaps this is a way to say, hey, look, this could be a guy that we feel has like the right traits and has maybe some things, some intangibles that other players on our practice squad don't have. And he's just going to need a minute or two to develop. But I would also just caution not to read too much into it yet, because we don't know how the offseason is going to shake out.
And it's also a situation too where I feel like possibly maybe he's a guy who was getting sniffed around by other teams.
Well, we thought he could be drafted. I mean, we thought he was a day 3 guy. I mean, not like super high, but day 3 guy.
By Chance wants to joke that he likes to joke that we're going to have, incoming 25 million mock drafts. We keep it to 1 a show. We're good. We're good boys. We keep it to 1 a show. And he also comes in and says he's a former 5-star. I always thought he was kind of frail, and that's what slipped him into day 3, 6 foot, 175 pounds, super skinny dude. But maybe he's developing. Maybe he's bulking and keeping his athleticism while bulking that frame. There's something to be said about development. We talked about Isaiah McKenzie earlier in the show. We've talked about Levi Wallace, etc. So maybe he's developing. So that'll be super interesting to see. And like I said, maybe he was getting sniffs around the league, and the Buffalo Bills were like, and he didn't want to sign with the Bills. Maybe he's like, I'm going to go test the market. A couple of teams have been sniffing around me on the practice squad. I'm going to go see if I can get a future deals elsewhere where I think I have a better chance. The Buffalo Bills are like, no, we really like you. We'll prove it to you. Money talks. We'll give you a 2-year deal as opposed to a 1. So if he does get cut, maybe he has some money coming his way, like 50,000 cap hit or something like that. So we don't know the details of the contract or anything of that nature yet. So it should be interesting. Davis Webb, to me, could he be following Brian Dable? Does he want to test the market? Could this just be a deal that's going to come later because they've already got something worked out, like a longer term deal, because they like him and want him to be the back of the future? Could he be moving in and sliding into Ken Dorsey's role as quarterbacks coach or Shea Tierney's role as assistant quarterbacks coach? Joining the coaching staff, something that we know Davis Webb has aspirations to do. A lot of different theories that could be floated around about Davis Webb not getting a futures deal when Trubisky's a UFA and Fromm is gone. What are your thoughts on Davis Webb before we get to Rob M super chat here?
I think it just the Bills are doing right by him, I think, in a way, by giving him the flexibility. And that's how I would view it, right? Is all right, Davis, you like, if anything, you have one more chance maybe at an NFL contract. If you can get one, that's not if you can get a legitimate contract, by all means. But we're also leaving you off a player contract in the situation where maybe you decide that you want to come in and coach, right? Because Trubisky is likely going to be gone, right? And the Bills are without a backup, essentially. So I think for the way I'm reading it, it's more just like giving Davis that flexibility that they feel like he's earned. It's more like a attaboy to him for all the work he's put in to give him that flexibility. And I don't think he's going to be too bent out of shape about not getting a futures contract, because I think knowing that Trubisky's out the door, if he wants to come back and be part of the roster, like I'm sure the Bills would welcome him with open arms, right? So that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, Jason M comes in and says Antonio Williams not getting one tells me the Bills are going to be peeking around running backs in the draft. Yes, I would agree that I think the Buffalo Bills will be peeking around a running back. I think they're going to try to look for a more souped up version of Matt Breida, a more legitimate version of Matt Breida. Rob M comes in and says can we finally end the discussion? And it's $20 super chat, so we super appreciate your generosity here, Rob. He says, can we finally end the discussion about Josh Allen as a top tier quarterback? Hello, Nick Wright. By the way, Gabe Davis is a monster. Can agree with you on all accounts there. Josh Allen was so good on Sunday that Nick Wright had nothing but kind things to say. I don't know if you've seen this, Rob M, but Nick Wright had nothing but praises for Josh Allen on whatever Fox Sports show he does with all those 5 people. I saw Michael Vick was there at other people. I don't know. But he had nothing but kind words to say. Listen, I said this on Twitter last night. Anyone who's still trying to knock Josh Allen or criticize Josh Allen or bring Josh Allen down, you're just doing it for attention, and it's just clickbait. And it's almost to the point where we shouldn't even involve ourselves in the conversation. We should just ignore it, because there's no argument to be made that he's not one of the best 3 quarterbacks in the National Football League. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are the 2 best quarterbacks in the National Football League, period, end of story. Could you throw Aaron Rodgers maybe into that mix? Yes, but guess what? He's 500 years old. Tom Brady's still a good quarterback? Yes, he is, but he's 500 years old. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert ain't there yet. A couple other guys knocking at the door of that top 5, guys like Russ Wilson, Deshaun Watson, etc. Of course they are. But right now, the 2 best quarterbacks in the National Football League, period, end of sentence, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and that was on full display. You can't argue it anymore. You just can't. You really can't. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, and probably Aaron Rodgers is going to win the MVP, but
it's a regular season award.
I know
that's where the narrative was before the playoffs started. So it's not going to shock me.
Like I said before, right? And for those who weren't here earlier, like there are 2 super, super elite quarterbacks in the NFC, and that's Tom Brady and that's Aaron Rodgers. They're both out of the playoffs, sitting at home. There are 2 super elite quarterbacks in the AFC, and that's Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Patrick Mahomes is the only, in my mind, super elite quarterback left in the playoffs, and that's why I think the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. But those guys in the NFC, like I said, older, not going to be around much longer. Brady might be done now. We don't know. Rodgers, what's the future going to hold for him? I mean, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are now becoming, if Tom Brady retires and Rodgers isn't here much longer, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are your faces of the NFL for the next 10 years at the quarterback position.
It's going to be real fun. I had it in my notes from earlier. I think that Kyle Knapp, our friend from Knapp Knows Buffalo podcast, he broke it down and he tiered it really nicely in the AFC. Where is it? I had so many pages of notes here today, all the way back on my first of 6 pages of notes. He said it was in the AFC. It was Allen and Mahomes. Then in the next tier, it's Burrow and Herbert, and then the next tier, it's Lamar Jackson, and then it's everyone else can have a say after that tier. And I thought that was a really nice breakdown from Kyle. That, and I always want to give him a shout out whenever I can because he's awesome, a friend of the pod, and he will be making numerous appearances this offseason as well on this show. So we're winding down. I still had secondary and linebackers that I wanted to talk about, but I think we can maybe save it for the roster deconstruction show. I got a couple of takes, but I'll keep the takes holstered. I'll keep the takes holstered because we're at an hour 45 now. I do
2
have a
shows a week, man. You gotta.
Yeah, we gotta save some takes. Gotta save some takes. I got a jabroni of the week that I gotta get off. I gotta get off my chest here.
Jabroni, you are 3 seconds away, and The Rock means 3 seconds away from The Rock to lay the smackdown on your candy ass.
Yeah, I can't stop you though. You keep using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
All right, and a couple of people were upset, so I'm going to fire off my linebacker take at the end of the show. I'm going to fire off my linebacker take at the end of the show. But my jabroni of the week is Brittany Matthews or Brittany Mahomes, whatever you want to call her. Have you seen the video that Barstool shared?
Pouring the champagne, that one? So that one?
I get it. They're the wife and brother of Patrick Mahomes, the franchise quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, the face of the National Football League. He's plastered all over every commercial on television. But why is it? So for those of you who haven't seen it, after the football game, Brittany Matthews had that stupid look on her face, screaming and yelling like she always does. And she cracked open a bottle of champagne and made it rain all over the people in the stands below her in the suite. She was just pouring the champagne all over. I don't have the clip with me. I didn't clip it. I apologize. If you go, I think it's Barstool shared it on Twitter. I retweeted it on Twitter, so you can find it on my @JudgeMathis. I shared the video along with the commentary that I'm about to share now. It's just like, if I were to take my beer and Stone Cold Steve Austin it all over 30 people in a football stadium, you know what they would do? They would kick my ass out of the football game. Why is it that she gets to? It was cold in Kansas. It wasn't Buffalo cold, but it was cold in Kansas City. Those people weren't asking her to shower them in champagne. And she just went and doused 20, 30 people in a whole bunch of champagne when it's freezing fucking cold out, all for her own sick, twisted pleasure. And then you have Jackson Mahomes, who just gets to walk around the stadium and do dances on people's fucking memorials and shit. Just these two have carte blanche to do whatever the fuck they want in NFL stadiums, and I just don't understand it. I just don't get
it. It sucks, right? Because you also can get the sense from some of the pictures you've seen where they're with Patrick that he knows they're being idiots, right? Like Patrick's got to be sitting there thinking, like, what is going on here? Because there's no way he can sit and think of that is acceptable behavior, right? I mean, there's just no way. But no one's stopping him, and that's the problem. No one's stopping him. No one's holding them accountable for anything. They have this sense of entitlement, obviously, because of Patrick. You shouldn't let that shit bother you. Well, I mean, it's a jabroni of the week segment, so we're just calling him out for doing dumb stuff. So
my favorite comment on Twitter to JD Plett's comment here: Jackson Mahomes is an entitled little piece of shit. Greg Vorse, friend of the show, formerly of Spectrum 9 News, he said the worst part about the loss on Sunday was the fact that Jackson Mahomes now gets to once again feel like he actually accomplished something.
I know. I know. I mean, that's such a great comment from Greg. I mean,
dude doesn't miss when he tweets, man. He does not miss.
Great tweeter, yeah.
Any jabronis of the week on your end?
I didn't have any major ones. I wasn't really I don't want to necessarily go as far to call him a jabroni of the week, but I've been kind of souring on Bill Cowher the last few weeks and his takes on the CBS, pre-games and half times. it seems like there's just always these little veiled shots that he's taking at the Bills. And then this past week, like he had to like sign off his it was either his pregame or his halftime with like just sucking off Tom Brady. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
really? Do you really like need to do that? Like he's probably gonna be back. Like he lost a playoff game. Oh, so sorry he didn't win another Super Bowl. Like, can we just not for once like
Yeah,
suck off Tom Brady?
that
So
was
it's just kind of culminated for me with Bill Cowher. I used to kind of like him, but now he's just kind of rubbing me
yeah.
the wrong way the last several weeks of the season. I
How
don't know.
how how great, speaking of Tom Brady, how great was it seeing him get his first ever unsportsmanlike conduct penalty? That
That
was
was pretty
fun.
sweet.
That
That
was
was pretty
fun.
sweet. That was
And
pretty
the
sweet.
thing is, he actually had a point. The dude got hit in the head and was bleeding, but
Yes. Well,
we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. Pops Mafia says the fan that ran the field, Stephon Diggs. I finally saw the video. Stephon
Oh,
Diggs fucking leveled him.
yeah.
That was
That
fun. And
fan
then
was the jabroni. Yeah.
my favorite after that was Deion Dawkins taking his shoe and throwing it into the stands. That was fun. So Deion's a real one for that one. And then obviously, how can we forget our coaching staff? For why you gotta remind us, JD, we were in such a good place. We were in such a good place at the end of the show here. We had worked through it all. We were starting to talk about the off season. We were in a good place, and JD brings it back. Our coaching staff are blowing a 3-point lead with
Well,
13
it's
seconds
fitting.
left. We've
It's
come full
fitting to wrap
circle.
the show as the coaching staff being the jabroni.
I still got to share my linebacker stake, and I just got to share. I'm going to share it again, but I just want to share it now, just so no one steals it. Okay. Just so I can say I did it first, so I can timestamp it. You've got to do in the Buffalo Bills content creation game. I want to see salary cap's going to be tight, right? I don't even want to see him extended. I want to see the cap relief of releasing AJ Klein. I understand that he's a very, very good player at what he does, and he is an awesome looking dude. I would also like to release Tyler Matakevich and save you could save about $7-8 million from releasing Tyler Matakevich and AJ Klein. In a year like this, I think it's important. I also fundamentally think in roster construction, players who do not play a lot, like those two players, shouldn't be accumulating that much of your salary cap, not when you're paying a quarterback $258 million. Andre Smith, Tyrell Dodson, Joe Giles Harris should be able to step in and fill the role of AJ Klein and Tyler Matakevich, both on defense and on special teams. On top of that, by clearing some of those players, Matakevich and Klein, from the linebacking room, that will free you up if you feel like a player is on the board to draft a linebacker in the top three rounds to hedge your bets in case Tremaine Edmonds leaves after this season or continues to sort of be this polarizing figure. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but Tremaine Edmonds was intentionally targeted by the Kansas City Chiefs. One of our best players, finger quotes best players, was intentionally targeted because the Kansas City Chiefs thought they had an advantage attacking him. So we have Rob M coming in.
How good did Nick Bolton look too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it could also be the way that they're used. Maybe if Tremaine Edmonds, as you mentioned, is used close to the line of scrimmage, we see a different Tremaine Edmonds. But Rob M comes in and says, I get that you guys are about to shade Edmonds. He's not London Fletcher. That's unfortunate, but Milano isn't either. We need a London Fletcher. Matt Milano had his worst football game probably of his career, at least of the career that he had. Since Matt Milano's been a relevant player, like maybe not outside of his rookie year, or at least since he's gotten at least this year, that was his worst game by a mile that I can remember. He got worked, absolutely worked. So the Bills got to ask themselves, you're sitting there in the third round, a guy like Terrell Bernard from Baylor is sitting there. You pull the trigger. If you let AJ Klein go, and as Randy Hardman points out, it saves you $6 million with only a $400K dead cap hit. AJ Klein is a very good player. I would love AJ Klein on this football team, but you're paying your quarterback $258 million, and look at that right there. I don't want to pay my third linebacker who barely plays football on defense. I don't even want to extend him or restructure him and pay him $2 to $3 million to play 15 snaps a game. I get it. He's great. He's a great locker room guy. He's a great depth piece. He's good to have in case of injury. Good football teams develop Tyrell Dodsons and Andre Smiths and Joe Giles Harris's to fill the role that AJ Klein is currently doing for a very, very hefty price. So if you're the Buffalo Bills and Tremaine Edmunds is on the last year of the deal, decisions need to be made. And releasing AJ Klein, releasing Tyler Matakevich frees up some roster spots to where you can invest significant draft capital in a linebacker and hedge your bets. That's my piece at linebacker.
Well, and we know Milano's not going anywhere, right? Obviously.
Yeah, no.
So it is a hedge, and are you willing to invest draft capital on a hedge, right? And maybe you can frame it that it's not a hedge, because if you don't bring back AJ Klein, or if you cut AJ Klein, then you can maybe spin it as like, hey, we need to replace AJ Klein, right? And then, let the camp battles play out as they do, right? But it is going to be a very, like, Tremaine Edmunds was my take me higher player of the game, and he did anything but, right? Like, I know there's an element of the coaches not putting him in great situations either, but like, I don't think anyone can objectively look at that game and say that he played well. And it was a chance for him to really, shift people's perceptions in the other direction, and he just didn't, right? In fact, he probably shifted more people to say, like what you're saying, right, to hedge against a possible letdown here in this final year.
And Daniel Gowries comes in and says, I don't see them releasing either Klein or Matakevich. I sort of agree with you. I just disagree with the decision. I don't think good football teams who pay a franchise quarterback pay that premium for depth linebackers. So that's just a fundamental disagreement that I have with Brandon Beane. I don't see them releasing them, but I do see Brandon Beane trying to find a compromise. I think AJ Klein and Tyler Matakevich both get extended to lower that cap hit, to spread that money out over multiple years. So I do think that Brandon Beane finds a way to keep them on the roster and lowers the cap hit. I just don't think it's necessary. I'd rather just cut them, because I think that in the real world, I think guys like Joe Giles Harris, Tyrell Dodson, and Andre Smith should be able to handle that stuff that AJ Klein and Tyler Matakevich currently do for like a combined $7 million, which I think is outrageous. All right. That should just about do it for this evening. It's hard to walk away from 205 people. Trust me. It's not something we want to do, but my wife will murder me if I go on for more than about 2 or 3 more.
And we
minutes.
won't be doing 2 shows a week.
We won't be doing 2 shows a week. I will be grounded. So I want to sign off by saying this. If you are listening to this via Apple or Spotify, etc., kudos to you for making it an hour and 58 minutes into this thing. And please, 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 please leave us a review. Subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. If you are watching on demand, Ronald R coming in saying that he was late. If you're watching on demand, maybe you're rewinding it, watching it again, leave us a comment in the comment section. Both of us make sure that we check the comment section. We scroll through the comment section on a regular basis. And if you have any questions or takes, etc., we're always going to try our best to comment on those. So leave a comment in the comment section. It really helps us with the YouTube algorithm. And if you are a live viewer right now, appreciate you putting up for 2 hours of our bullshit here. We really appreciate it. You guys truly, like,
we needed it. We needed it.
You needed it. You guys make the show. This thing is, you guys are the third host of the show. You are the engine that drives the show. We truly, truly appreciate it. Smash that like button before you head out. If you are a fan of this show, share it with a friend, share it with family, somebody you think might appreciate it, and let them come join this party here at the Air Raid Hour. And thank you guys for a great season. It was like the Buffalo Bills season. We had some ups and downs in terms of where we are broadcasting, but it was another magical season. I can't wait to get this off season started with you in the comment section and with you, Dave. It's gonna be a good ride. It's gonna be a fun ride.
It's gonna be a fun ride, and this is our bread and butter here coming up this off season. So let's do it. I
got one question before we go, though. I got one question.
Are we having fun yet?
And I got to change
Oh.
that graphic now that you put that up. I'm reminded me I have to make it Mondays and Thursdays.
Mondays
at 9
and
p.m.
Thursdays, and perfectly right on cue. 2 hours. Until next time, ladies and gents, go Bills.
Go Bills.